States. I have no idea what time it is down and under, but it is time for Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mecky. So I hope you have your tinfoil hat all made and cinched down tight over your ears. So take it away, Dave and Mecky.
Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mecky, broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radio on freedomslits.com. That's revolution.radio if you're looking for it on the internet, where it's more than just radio, so jump in the chat room if you can, if you've got something available to you to get into the chat room. Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mecky, broadcasting from Australia. That fixed that. Okay, this is show number 347. 347. That's 740 and 300 in Mecky speak. And it's online, on air, and on your smart device. So grab an app to listen from anywhere, or listen at home if you don't want to be anywhere when you're doing it. Maybe pick yourself up a Grace Tabletop digital radio. If you miss Solaris' show, that's the one that comes on before ours. She had Jenna Padilla Valadez. I'm sorry, my pronunciation is terrible. And they were talking about the supernatural. It was really cool. I caught most of it, and I'm glad I did. Now, you don't have to have, you can't claim you just missed out, so there you go, right? Never going to look at that. I'll never listen to that. I must have missed it, so I just move on. Thanks, Batman. A Batsman in the chat room. 347, that's right. Because you can't claim it. Because you can go back in time. You can. Just sign up to the station's archives and provide a donation per month of $5.95. That's what I do. It's just a thing it's just a recurring thing. I don't even notice it. Because that's like a triple shot coffee that I start my day with every day anyway. So what's one extra coffee a month, right? It's nothing. Do it. And get yourself access in there. Because when you do that, you've got access to all of the hosts' shows. All of the hosts. All of their shows. So you could pick up our show on an MP3 and listen to that. You know, I commute, and I've got a long commute ahead of me every day. It's more than an hour, and I take the time to download some of the other host shows. I have some favourites of mine, and I listen to those, and I'm glad, because instead of that waste of time just sitting there doing nothing, I get to listen to some great talent and some great topics and some, superstars in a genre. Do it for yourself, and then you'll know who we're talking about. If you're listening to this on YouTube, for instance, do you know there's a whole radio station connected to this YouTube channel of ours, where we have permission to put our shows on YouTube. But if you want the other host shows, there you go. Right? They don't do the same thing. So try it out. And it means, you've got to sleep sometime, right? I joke because I rarely sleep. I sleep just a couple of hours a night. I have a really hard time sleeping. And I think I heard Solaris talking about this, and she's fantastic, by the way. And hats off to her and all the guests. And she was saying, recalibrated for this world. There's something really weird about sleeping for 8 hours and being awake, right, for 16. It doesn't do me any justice. I can't do it. I can't. Oh, it's 18. It's 16 hours. I've been awake. I'm going to go to sleep now and wake up in 8 hours' time. That doesn't happen. I'll have a couple of hours sleep and bam, there I am. I'm up and conscious and thinking, and I only live on a couple of hours a night, unfortunately. But it seems to do me okay. It's almost like there was a planet with a higher rotation, or it's a larger planet. Maybe it had two suns or something. I don't know. Right? I can't imagine that my existence would have done really well historically. Like there's no reason I can see for it, unless it's to tend the fire. Right? Keep getting wood to cut down and chop up for the fire. I don't know. But I tend to I get broken sleep and it's awful. Anyway, I'm not here to complain to you. I'm just giving you a heads up. There are a number of people who suggest that maybe they weren't designed to be on this planet. Maybe another planet with a faster rotation or a longer day. Because I could probably work comfortably at least 24 hours and then have about maybe a 5 or 6 hour sleep. And I'd be happy with that. You know. So maybe a 30-hour day. Maybe. Work for 24 hours, sleep for 6, do it again. I think that would suit me well, and that was where I was coming from. So, okay, so as you can tell, Meckie's not with us. His plans were and are from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. our time, because of the daylight savings change in the eastern US, where this station is broadcasting from, and that affects our time zone. So we go through 3 different time zone changes, one in the middle where both are unchanged. One is changed and the other one hasn't. And when they're both changed in one direction and both changed in the other direction, that's the 3 different zones. And this is the beginning of the third of the zones. So our show in Australian time, Eastern Australian time, is 4 till 6, then 5 till 7, and then 6 till 8. And it's at either of those ends. It stays in the middle for a very short time between the catch up of the two countries, between their daylight saving time. And just be careful, there's no plural, there's no daylight savings. You know, you don't collect anything, there's no sort of monetary value, and it won't fade your curtains. All the funny things. You don't get to work longer. It makes no sense. It should be abolished. Because you sort of just get used to it and then it's changed again. Let's just change it again. Why not? And it's hard. I don't know what it's like in the US, but in Australia there's certain places that join each other with a border where one of them does the daylight saving and the other one doesn't. And if you're hopping border and you're having to get up to meet someone on the other side, you really have to start thinking about, well, what time is it there? I don't know. I don't know. So, that's always comical. Anyway, I'm going to... Those that sleep 8 hours a night waste 1/3 of their life. That's funny. I'll sleep when I'm dead, says Bon Jovi. I'm going to live while I'm alive and sleep while I'm dead. When I'm dead, I think. Someone corrected me in the chat room. So thanks, Jerry B. Okay, so I must say and recognise the traditional custodians of the land. Where I live, it's the Darkinjung people. Where Meckie lives, it's the Guruk people. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and future. So someone may listen to this in the future, and we're talking about the present then. Does it make sense? I hope it does. That's what our intention is. And let us remember that beneath our houses, beneath the concrete we've laid down, beneath the roads and the buildings, are lands which have had stories passed down for over 240,000 generations. Think about that. Think about that, how that might affect where you live. Think about the stories that, because we're talking stories passed down, and that's pre-written history, where the only writings were paintings and cave paintings. You must think about that. Oh, also, Batsman and Jerry B, thinking about the time that you've actually got to yourself while you sleep is time that you can escape and you can meet others in your sleep. Think about that. There was a Star Trek episode where the Borg were doing it while they regenerated, and they were running to a place and they were able to frolic around without any of their appendages as themselves. And I think it's really interesting that that's something that Mecki and I postulated is actually entirely possible here where we are. And that Gene Roddenberry was a visionary and saw that that's one of our escapes, is dreaming. You know, what do your teachers do? Stop your daydreaming. Concentrate on what you're teaching me. A thing I'll never use again? Sure, why not? Because the teachers only teach control, and they teach everyone to be the same. And in Australia, the curriculum has been designed to make an office worker. That's it. Someone barely reasonable enough to be able to perform simple tasks in an organization. That's it. Or at a cannery. Depends on when you leave school. You might make it all the way to a simple office worker. If you'd like more education, like to be a manager or anything like that, you'd have to go to university. Really? Great. Yeah, except for the guy who created his own company because he had an idea and managed to get funding somehow and then did it. Usually dropped out of school early because it was boring them. Isn't that interesting? Anyway, moving on. So I've done the promo. Now, there was a couple of really cool things that I found this week, and I think I'll start with the San Andreas Fault. Now, I know it hasn't been a great problem of recent times. There is a very real danger of a giant slip, but what I've seen in the last 24 hours was 39 quakes, and I ask whether the big one is due. I mean, it's a reasonable question to ask, but you probably have a big one if you didn't have so many small ones, if it built up pressure. If these 29 small quakes suddenly cease and they were in a direction, they were working down the fault line and then they get blocked, and it builds up pressure in a particular zone. If it doesn't go past that zone, if the whole thing doesn't slip past itself through these minor quakes, then you've got a blockage, and that blockage will fail with a single large fault failure in the fault. All right, so I'm keeping my eye on it. Certainly the globe has had some amazing uplift in velocity, the intensity, also very deep earthquakes near New Zealand and Vanuatu in the Pacific. Extremely deep, very high, like 8s. And then across in South America, those split off into 2 different places, and they'll be replicated in size, but closer to the surface within 7 days. Now, I'm not doing a Dutch synth here. I'm saying I watch his channel, I listen to what he says. I think he's onto something, despite all of the negative press that he might have. I would have to say gravitational waves is something that I'm sure, coming from the galactic plane, since we're crossing through that, however thick that is, we don't know, But if you have a gravitational distortion, then you can have differences in space-time which could cause a shear in gravitational forces. So forces may be in opposition with each other or not equal strength in a very thin plane, and that could be one of those things that we're experiencing, and it could be a cause, because I've never seen so many earthquakes above 5.5 for the rest of my past up until recently. So maybe the last 6 years it's getting worse and worse and worse and more prevalent. And don't anyone argue that there's more monitoring equipment. Yeah, there are, but they're monitoring that you don't get, just because you have more monitoring equipment doesn't mean you get more quakes monitored. You could put 1 million seismic sensors around the planet and not detect any more if there weren't any more. I hope you can understand what that means. It's like 1 million cameras on the same objects. You're not going to get any more numbers of objects. The amount of objects don't change just because there's more things looking at them. Right, I hope that makes sense. It makes sense to me. And so since we're seeing an uplift, there must be something going on, and I'm thinking gravitational waves, and I'm thinking they're coming from the galactic plane. They emanate outwards from the galactic center, from our galaxy's center core. And if there's more of them, maybe that's what does it. If the shape of them changes, if there is shearing between them, so maybe they were smooth before, or maybe because we're undulating, right? So we're like a sine wave. We go below the galactic plane, then we go above it, then we go below. It's like 33,000 years or something that I can't remember the actual length of time. But that length of time is enormous, and so we're going through it. And it was something that the Mayans decided that they should be counting and recognize as this is the dark rift. We're crossing the dark rift. Now, what does that mean? Could mean anything. Translations and vocabulary can change a context, and if context is lost because we don't have a word for it, or they didn't have a word for it, or they're describing it the best way they've been told to describe it, then I don't think we're going to see anytime soon. That's an interesting one. SQL error occurred while fetching this page. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's all it is that we're crossing the galactic plane and there's gravity shifts causing shear in the plane, and the Earth simply doesn't like it very much. There is a lot of talk, and this has a segue, by the way. There is a lot of talk around other planets and Nibiru, and there's a lot of religious types talking about wormwood. There are a lot of people out there who believe it's inbound, and that's where this gravity is coming from. Now here's the segue. Okay, so we've launched into space a number of telescopes. One of those was Kepler, and it was reasonably good at being able to identify planets around stars by the dimming cycles, which is really cool. Now, I appreciate the work that went involved with that, and the scientists who have been evaluating that information, and Kepler's abilities, well designed piece of kit that they put up there. That's fantastic. Hopefully, everyone will finally come to their senses and agree that life has to exist everywhere and that the universe is teeming with life. This makes sense. Even if you're not a gambling person, someone's got to win lotto, right? Someone has to. And so they've launched a telescope called Gaia, which is really well named, to be honest. And what are they looking for? They're looking for another Earth. But the Gaia Space Telescope data has revealed something else. It's been able to determine what the Milky Way galaxy stars are actually doing. So, you take a photo of the Milky Way, maybe, I don't know, from Earth and looking out there, and it's just a single frame. It's like taking a very high-speed frame of racing cars. We know that the car must be moving and doing something, but the photo doesn't show any movement. So, the driver in the second car may be accelerating past the first one. We don't know. Not from the photo. It's not evident. We can't see any. We have a single point of reference. We have a single photograph with a number of cars in it. We can't tell what's doing what. Don't know. So, what the Gaia Space Telescope was able to do was plot the direction of each of the stars. Now, they pointed it in a number of directions, and were able to, and I'll get to this at the end, but it's actually, there's an app, and it's downloadable, and the data set is downloadable too, and you can look through the data yourself now. But what's really interesting, that the science team looking into this data and being able to comb through it with 1.2 billion stars in reference. There's not enough scientists on the planet, so what they've done is made this thing downloadable, right? So you can download it and the data, and you can, three-dimensionally fast forward and reverse, pause any point in space where it's looked, and you can go through the data yourself. How cool is that, right? You should do it. Look up the Gaia Space Telescope data. Now, I have to say this. I mean, if Meki was here, I'd ask the question, he'd answer it. But I'm going to ask the question anyway, as if Meki was here. What do you reckon was the first thing they looked for? I mean, honestly, what do you think was the first thing was the scientists were looking for in the data? Because that was really interesting to find out. Guess what it was? It was to see if they could identify the star and its planets that flew through our solar system, and be able to backtrack to identify which one it was. Bingo, there's Nibiru. They're looking for it. You can't tell me they're not. So when we look in the night sky, we don't see anything. We need to see a bunch of, white points of light. That's it. But what they were able to do in different frequencies was identify all of the brown dwarfs. They were able to identify all of the, the gas giant, super stars. So there's some of those are, a million times bigger, but they couldn't place them previously with Kepler. They couldn't say, oh, it's so many light years away. But using a value of our star as the measuring stick, They said if it's brighter, it must be closer. If it's dimmer, it must be further away. But they didn't calculate the size until later, though they worked out some of the star sizes, but not the billions of stars that they've been able to identify. So this means now that they've identified the placement in the universe, in our galaxy, of all the stars that we can see, and we really can't see very far at all. I've got to be honest with you. We really don't see very far. All of the stars that we see are like popping your head up over your back fence and just taking a look around at the other houses in neighbouring yards. That's really it. We really don't see very far away. So what they were able to do was they've identified a particular star that in the future will come through our solar system. But before you run to your prepper's cabin up in the woods, right, it's 1.2 million years away. It's a star with it's a full star system with planets and everything, and it's going to pass through ours, because the reason why they were so intent on looking for the one that has already been through was the evidence that we currently have found in our own solar system, right? So we have planets with weird traits, like we have like this reverse spin and this rolling on its side. There's things that don't look like they should be in orbit around the sun because they're too small and too far away, and they look like they might have been captured by something. And the moon also came up, so maybe the moon was captured. Maybe, remember the stories that the Anunnaki were talking about, where Tiamat was the Earth before it was the Earth, and it was smacked in by another planet, and the result of that collision resulted in a smaller body, and that was the Earth now. And scientists are telling us that the Pacific Basin, the Ring of Fire, that crust is different than all the other crust on the planet, and that crust that has no continents on it, that piece is the rear of the planet that slammed into us. And at that point, it changed everything. Maybe that brought life with it. We don't know. So I just wanted to put that out there. This is what the scientists are doing with this data. So feel free to download it and check it out, because it's really cool that it's even possible and that they're even sharing this stuff. And we know that they're looking for it. They know that there's evidence there. They admit all of this. And there's a YouTube video out that you can look for this yourself. Just look for Gaia Space Telescope Discoveries or something similar to that, and you should come across it. There's a lady with dark ringlety kind of curly hair at a podium, and with glass and curved white columns behind her. She's being filmed at an angle, and she's one of the scientists who are looking at the data for anything, any kind of hint. And this ability to roll backwards and forwards in time is fabulous, and them sharing this data, unheard of. So I just want to say how amazing is this time, where we would only ever have this reported in the news after they found something later on, or maybe not at all. So I think it's a good time to be alive. Now, it brings me to all the way, being alive, it brings me all the way back to being in Australia, at possibly the worst segue ever, coming from space to claiming that I'm still alive, then to Australia, because Australia is certainly the most deadly continent on the planet, because there's things in the water and on land that can kill you. Especially where all the other continents have some kind of fur-covered apex predator. We know it's a lion, a cheetah, a tiger, and a cheetah. Cheetahs don't kill humans. It could be, hyenas, tigers, lions. Could be bears. They're covered in fur. Could be polar bears. They'll kill you. Even though they're not the apex predator, so, per se, but they still have the ability to kill you. But this continent is the only one that hasn't got any of those things, and yet almost everything else tries to kill you. And I'm not going to suggest that that's good, that everything's trying to kill you, but it's not limited to that. So at my block of land, for instance, I've already encountered 3 of the top 10 deadliest snakes in Australia in my own house. The first one is the brown snake. Not the king brown, but the brown. It's still deadly. It'll kill you. The death adder, well, it'll kill you. Well, that's a paddling. And also the red-bellied black snake. So they're the 3 snakes that I've identified on my block of land, where my house is, where my kids play, where I walk around barefoot outside. But it's worse than that, right? We've got a brand new snake to add to the list of snakes. This is just in the snakes part of all the creatures. But this one isn't deadly at all. And I've put a video out on YouTube called I run a things in my yard. If you actually look for that quote, things in my yard, this is the things in my yard edition that I've added, and it was a diamond python in my chicken coop. It surprised me to find it. I didn't know that that's what I was about to find. My partner, she was just closing the chicken coop up the other day, and she said that there was a very short snake, very small short snake, because we've been having some really hot temperatures. So we had 10 degrees over the average this week. 10 degrees. So normally it's more than 12, 14, maybe 14 degrees Celsius over the average temperature we had this week. Whereas if it's normally 24 degrees this time of year, we had 38 degrees Celsius. That's pretty hot. And it was really high humidity. And the next day it was like 32, and I went out there in the 32 degree day only to find this big snake in there. Now the snake itself, the diamond python, the pythons aren't venomous. It's only a constrictor, but it was an extremely rare version of the diamond python, which is rare only to the Gosford area that I live in, and it's so rare that it's only found within a 10-kilometre radius. That's it. It's basically the Gosford Basin. I was very pleased to have found such a rare snake. But what I did find, it was living in my chicken coop, but it didn't have any chicken-sized bulges in it, but it maybe had an egg bulge, and I don't mind, that's fine. We have too many eggs. And the snake itself was between maybe 2 yards long. It's about 1.8 meters to 2 meters long. That's a pretty big snake. I don't care who you are. It's, if I lay down next to it, it's taller than me. And yeah, look, despite a wildlife arc, and we have the reptile park, which is only a couple of k's away, where I usually take all my venomous spiders. But the reptile park, I gave them a call, and they said, look, if you'd like it to be rehomed, you can call Wildlife Arc, and if they're interested, they'll come and relocate it for you. And since it was, a very rare snake, they'd only just sort of shoo it along. But they said to me, you know what, don't even worry about it. It'll eat rodents. Pretty much. It might eat an egg or two, but, you could play with it. I said, oh, really? What kind of play with it are you talking about, play with it? He said, oh, you can wrap it around your arm, and you can give it hugs, the kids can pat it. Okay. So I do appreciate Tim's advice. I sent him photos of it. He sent it to his experts. They sent back the good news that it was a non-venomous, playful, even diamond python, which will just cut down the rodents in my chicken coop. So because it was so playful, I have to say, that we've named it Glitter, because it's a black snake, a black background, dotted with yellow spots. And those yellow spots occur, like you've probably seen diamond python centers of all the diamonds down its back. In place of there being a diamond pattern, it was just a constant background field of very small yellow spots like stars. And then in the center of where those diamonds would be were a cluster of 6 or 8 yellow spots. Extraordinary. Something else. I've got it. You'll see it in the video if you have a look at my Things in My Yard diamond python video on YouTube. Anyway, so we named it Glitter. The girls called it Glitter because it looks so pretty like. And if it should want to come back, we'll actually probably do some family photos with it because it's such a beautiful looking snake. So yeah, awesome. Good for you, Snakey. Come back. We call the huge huntsmans that you can't cover with your hand, right, on the wall. They'll hide behind a painting or artwork, or behind the air conditioner or behind the curtains, and dart out and grab stuff because they're flat, designed to be under the peeling bark of a tree, and when something lands, they'll come out from behind the bark and grab it and pull it back and eat it, right? So we call those spiders leggy. They're all the same. I mean, it's just the size changes. And they're actually venomous, but people don't tend to pick them up with their hands. You'll just cover it with something and slide some cardboard beneath that and then take it outside and let it go. There's no crushing it. You can spray a whole can of spray on it. It'll just walk out of it like that, that silver, molten silver metal Terminator through the flames. It'll just keep walking. It probably gives it a bit of a buzz. Who knows? I'm not a spider. So, using spider as the segue, at my house I have hundreds of funnel web spiders out in my yard. You'd be surprised to hear that, I'm sure, right? I don't care where you live in the world, but it's a spider who's, and it scares me thinking about this, and it's the only thing I'm truly frightened of, because when I picture the spider doing it to me, biting me through my grown male adult big toenail, is what it can do with its fangs. That image of it doing it is so awful, but you're really unlikely for that to happen unless you put your shoe on without looking and your shoe has been on the ground. So we keep our shoes locked away or up above the ground, or you step on them, you like completely crush the shoe, toes and all, back and forth, and then hit it on the ground to make sure the dead thing, whatever it is that was in there, was going to fall out. Because it lives underground, you see, and it doesn't do much. There's no real funnel. It makes a silk sock that it lives in, usually under a rock. It'll dig out under a rock, and it likes high humidity, doesn't like dry. So when they're dry and it's cool, you don't usually see them, but when it's really hot, they'll start wandering around looking for a new house to push someone else out. Oh, good night, Jerry B. He's off to, he says, waste another 8 hours of his life sleeping, I'm presuming. That's funny. So, apart from the funnel web spiders, we've got a number of redback spiders that usually appear seasonally. We've got scorpions. We have what look like snakes, but they're called legless lizards, and they usually live in like a wood pile or something. We have these things called black skinks, which are lizards as well, but they're shiny black, and if you only saw a part of them, you'd think they were one of the red-bellied black snakes, but they're much bigger and they've got legs. They usually run really fast. Because they're black, they absorb more of the sun's energy, and because of that become really super agile. ultra fast. And we also have these predatory ants. These ants are called jumping jacks, and they evolved from ants into wasps and then back again. So they've retained this, some of the qualities of being a wasp, like really small numbers in their population, in their nest. And they've also got really good eyesight. And they've retained the sting of a wasp. They're one of the very few ants on the planet that have the sting of a wasp. It's got the same chemical makeup as the wasp sting, and it's not the evolution of the precursor to the wasp. It's been an ant, then a wasp, and back to an ant. It just preferred it that way, I think. And they actually hunt you down, and they also have been proved to be clever enough to solve simple problems to gain access to their prey. So because of their great eyesight and their what appears to be a pretty good intelligence, and that they can see you, they hunt you down. Like if you disturb their nest and walk away, they'll send a couple out to go get you, just like wasps would do the same thing, right? So their ability to fly through the air and come and get you is a wasp. Well, they've got the ability to still retain your ID. Like they can ID you and come and get you. They do. And boy, don't they hurt, right? So now that's just on my block of land. On my block of land. I know where these nests are, so I sort of stay away from them. And it's funny. Well, it's not really funny. There's only one real cure, and the Aboriginals had it because they would have been barefoot as well and lived in the same environment where I live. And there's an unfurled bracken fern that when you mush it, it sort of turns to a paste, and you can like a jelly kind of aloe vera kind of pasty thing, and you put that on there, and pretty much straight away the pain starts going away. But you're hunting it down because you've just mowed the lawn and blown the nest away, and then you can't go anywhere near that whole area for hours. Oh, I'll tell you, I've done that before. And my friend had done that too. I've been on holidays. My friend just said, look, I'll do your lawn while you're away. That was Dave, my mate, and he did that. And he's rung me, and there's a number of them biting him. And I said, look for this little bracken fern thing. And he said, but I cut them all down, man. I cut them all down. There's none left. I looked everywhere. I said, well, then you're just going to have to brush them off and move on. He goes, oh, no, I'm packing up. I'm out of here. Poor thing. So anyway, something else I recently found out, and that is that Australia has another unusual item. Now, I thought the platypus was pretty unusual. It's got everything. It's got the sting it's got the venom in its spike in its rear leg of a snake. It has a duck bill. It's a mammal, and it lays eggs, and it looks like sort of like a beaver, all at the same time. Looks like it was made from the bits that were left behind. That's our joke. But it's worse than that. I found a venomous snake, the only venomous snake on the planet that lives above the snow line in the mountains. So in every other country on the planet, you're safe in a snow line. There's no snakes, and if there is, they're hibernating, and they're not venomous, and it's going to be fine. But no. So not only, in the water where we have stingers and irukandji, which are about less than an eighth of an inch across, and they're almost invisible in the water. You don't really see them. They've stung you because your arm feels like it's on fire, and you need to be hospitalized for about 2 weeks from this thing that's only a couple of millimeters across. There's the stingers. If you get done by one of those, good luck. You'll usually die. The blue-ringed octopus, you'll probably have a cardiac arrest because it ceases your muscle functions, and you'll drown. So you can't even swim after either of those 2 bites. You're absolutely right, Nighthawk. It's amazing that anyone makes it to adulthood in Australia, to be honest. But we all do. We just know that they're out there, and you just avoid it, right? But to find out the lowland copperhead, and why it's called lowland copperhead, if it lives in the snow line, above the snow line, where it's not the lowlands anymore, is beyond me. So, apart from all of those other creatures, it's pretty good. It's good living. The sun's hot, but the sun will kill you too. People have died from sun exposure. And you don't want that either. The velvet ant. I'll have to look that one up. The wingless wasp. Yeah. They're probably very similar. So anyway, Meckie's going to join us in just after the break. He's going to join us, and we'll get on to the show topic in, I suppose, episode or show number 347. And tonight's topic, so stay with us after the break. Tonight's topic is death, resurrection, and Christmas. We've bundled these together because they happen to have a linked theme. Yeah, look, Nighthawk, I'm going to send you an email with what the jumping jacks look like, or at least have a look for the Australian jumping jack, and tell me if they're the same. They have, instead of the typical, head, thorax, and abdomen, the 3 segments, it looks like they've got 5 segments because of where the wings would have attached. And their orange and black pattern is unique, and there's not even a mimic creature that looks the same. And these ants have these for gripping specifically for flight. They've got these huge mandibles at the front that have spikes on them to hold on to their prey. So, wow, no, that's not what ours look like. Hawk, paste in one of the ones that I'm talking about, the Australian jumping jack. You'll see an image for that, and you can do a comparison. So you can see this has got a head, a thorax, and an abdomen, and everything joins at the thorax, right? Oh wow, that's funny. Nighthawk, the station owner, he says that he angered one in a tobacco field, and it was chasing me down the row, and it was bitching and yelling. That's funny. So ours don't make any sound at all. They're stealthy. If you pick up the thing it's on, it'll bite you to drop it. And when I mean bite you, it holds on to you and then turns its butt around and just perpetually stings you till you get the picture. You get the idea. So, and we do have some interesting things that we talk about, particularly when tourism is the topic, and someone wants to know, is it safe? Is it not safe? And I've got one of my friends that I worked with for a while. He was born and raised in Singapore, in an apartment way off the ground. He never had exposure to any soil at all. None. No soil. No creatures, no soil, nothing. And then when he came to Australia, he was so scared to actually experience anything at all. He wouldn't move out of the city. He wouldn't drive anywhere. He wouldn't go anywhere where he could experience any of these creatures. And rightly so too, I have to say. The fear was probably wanted. And he said that he refused to even, come and visit my place, and wouldn't leave the apartment that he was living in the city. I can see Meckie's now here. The music's about 1 minute 47 seconds later than normal, so I'll just keep going till I hear the music. Meckie's going to be joining us as soon as the break starts. And Meckie's right, huntsmans are okay, redbacks and flutterwebs you got to worry about. Yeah, Yeah, and I've actually got a YouTube clip of me playing with one on the kitchen counter that I've captured outside and done a small YouTube piece. I've also done a YouTube clip of actually capturing one gently. It looks like I'm being a bit harsh with it with a stick, but I'm not. And I get it fully intact into a jar. There's the music. All right. Take the station break for a toilet break, possibly, and a donation break. Don't forget to come back. Mackie will join us. This is show 347, and after the break, we'll be talking about death, resurrection, and resurrection.
You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Okie dokie, and welcome back to Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mackie. And Dave has been taking you to the first hour solo because we are going through daylight savings today. That's right, today is the day that you put your clocks back, forward, back, either. I don't know which one it is for you guys.
All of them.
But it's daylight savings. This is the weekend, November 4th, guys. And this is show number 347, 740, and 300. 740 and 300. That's a lot of shows. That's a lot of, yeah, that's right, you heard it. The crowd goes wild. She goes crazy. Oh, my goodness. Speaking of which, I saw some interesting news this week, crazy news, in fact, but I'll get to that in a second. So yes, thank you very much for listening, everybody. Listener Funded Radio, that means you can and should and will, I'm sure, donate money to the station because the station runs entirely on listener donations. You guys, you're funding the station. It's awesome. It also means that what Dave and I do here is completely pro bono. Meaning we don't get a crumb for it. Not a thing.
What?
Not a cent. Yes, I know, right? Look at you. Look, read your contract again, okay?
You signed a contract.
Yeah, we signed no contracts, no. But Hawk and everybody else is doing an awesome job, of course, keeping the station running. If your audio is low, just turn up the volume. Turn up the volume. That's what you need to do.
Can't do it without Hawk. He does a great job in the background.
It's absolutely. He birthed this station. No, Dave. Look, I want to share some really crazy news. I don't know if you've mentioned this. Both Dave and I are, you could say fans, certainly fans, avid devotees, maybe not, of The Simpsons. The Simpsons. In 1989, it launched at the Tracy Ullman Show. There you go. That's the whistle. I think we get sued for that. But
I didn't sing Happy Birthday.
That's true enough. Yeah. All right. Now, thank you, Gerber. We'll see you in 2. You get some shut-eye if you can. And yes, we are the comrades. Oh, that's probably a dig at my socialist rant last week. So yeah, Simpsons are pretty cool, right? I haven't really been watching them on regularly. I used to watch them religiously in the 90s. And it's cool. But one of probably the most beloved characters has been written out of the show. You say, why? Okay, it happened before, right? Bleeding Gums Murphy, he died. Then of the voice actors,
Dr. Marvin Monroe was also
Dr. Marvin Monroe, he was written out, and then one of the actual voice actors was killed by his wife in a jealous rage, and all his characters
in a writ of Phyllis Jade.
Yes, in Jealous Rage. Fit of Jealous Rage. Yeah, it was. It was the guy who was doing Troy McClure, if you remember him. This is Troy
Hartman.
Yes, that's exactly right. And he was. I liked him as an actor, but clearly he was. Well, he was doing whatever he was doing.
His wife liked him less than we did.
Yes, much less, much less. And apparently, Troy McClure on the show was an ichthyophile. Yes, but that was. That means he likes fish more than you or I.
That was what you discovered.
That was his dirty secret. But they've written out Apu. I wouldn't even attempt his last name, but and the reason they've written him out. Close enough, I'm sure.
That'll have to do.
It'll have to do. They wrote him out because of negative, I guess, feedback. I guess it was a racial thing in the way they made fun of his accent, or that he's a stereotypical quickie mouth owner because he's Indian, right? Obviously, or he's got 50 kids or whatever it is. So, so they had to write out because there was a huge backlash apparently. I'm thinking, well, what about the groundskeeper Willie? I mean, okay, let's be clear. The Simpsons are not real life. I know. It's a little strange, but it's not real life. And most of the characters on it are, by necessity, cardboard cutouts. Some have more depth than others, but they're essentially meant to be satires or parodies of existing stereotypes. That's the whole point of the show. Homer Simpson's a lazy fat American who doesn't like to work. Okay? Oh, no, we can't have that. No more Homer Simpson. Okay? Bart Simpson, a disrespectful, I think it's 10, right? 10-year-old for the last 30 years. 10-year-old that gives us, run for our money, and they all kind of have that. No. We're gonna have the Partridge Family now. No one's gonna watch that. So I think our political correctness has just gone too far. I mean, it's gotten to a point where you can't say Merry Christmas in school. Or maybe you can again. I spoke to a couple of people in the States last week, and they told me that had been reversed, and you can actually now, once again say Merry Christmas in school. You can also put posters up that say Merry Christmas without offending anyone. Well,
Happy Festivus.
Happy Festivus for the rest of us. It might still offend people, but apparently that's now okay, if that's in fact what's happening. But come on, I mean, we gotta laugh. We gotta be able to laugh at this. I mean, you look at Cheech and Chong, and okay, are they making fun of people that smoke dope? Yeah, but it's funny. Okay, no, I don't see anyone, climbing the barricades. Oh, you're misrepresenting cannabis users. No,
cannabis.
It's not. Yeah. It's not. That's not the thing, though, right? It's The Simpsons. It's like a freaking cartoon. Pardon my French.
It is
a cartoon.
It's a cartoon. You know what? Get off your high horse and just enjoy it for what it is. You know what, Mecky? Every country they visited, they've made fun of that country, right? Whether that fun is true or not. So we don't have bootings, but we enjoy. We can laugh at ourselves. We can. We laugh at ourselves. We think that's very funny. That's right. Bring the boot. The koala that went off, that was clung onto the helicopter to go off into another country and invade it, like our country had been invaded by foreign species.
Hey,
these are all jokes.
They are, of course, they're jokes.
They're jokes. Get over it. And I dare you, and I'm going to get some heat over this, and I'm happy to receive some heat, right? And the question is, do you think that Apu should be written out? And if you don't, if you strongly believe that this is a mistake, then write your congressman, right?
Yeah, right. That's worthwhile.
Why? That's a Simpsons line. Because my whole life is stored in the back of my head, and it's all.
But what about the children? What won't anyone think of the children?
That's right. Hi, everybody.
So let's be clear, though. Okay, there are so many things to worry about. There's 14 million people facing imminent starvation in Yemen. 14
Does anyone
million.
care? No, let's just write Apu out.
we have tuberculosis is developing, and a strain of tuberculosis which is completely it's a multi-resistant tuberculosis. It can't be treated by no antibiotics, no none of that. We see some power play between the Chinese and the Americans, and that's all goodness. But what we focus on here is the character Apu on The Simpsons, because that is clearly the most pressing issue we face at this time. If this were true, we'd be living in paradise. If the most important thing in the world right now was whether or not Apu is a stereotype and maybe portraying a negative Indian, I guess, character, if you will, from a role model perspective, if that was the thing that should keep us up at night, dude, I would leave my door unlocked. I would have gold bars in front of my house, okay, for everyone to see. Not that I have any, but I would get some just to make a point. Because that's the biggest problem we have. Awesome. I want to move to their place. I want to move where that's the biggest problem. That's where I want to live. Okay, Dave? That's my new place. That's my home.
I like that idea. You see,
right?
You're right, Mackie. You're right. With Iran, China, and Russia on one team, and the rest of us on another. Wow. Why aren't we talking about that? Iran has been throwing, threats over the fence. As well.
That's right.
So,
I don't think it's teams though.
You want some distraction from Bitcoin and right? You want some distraction from the election? Is that what it was?
That sounds good.
Maybe it's a vote grabber, right? I don't know.
From the election, ba-boom, ba-boom. You try to tune. That's really nice. Distraction from the election, ba-boom, boom, boom, boom. Yes, that's right, Dave. You're 100% correct. That's distract. The thing is this though. I'm flabbergasted that we're even discussing this, and I'm actually flabbergasted that actually happened. Right? It's just it's such a non. I mean, he's been going for 30 years. 30 years.
30 years.
And now I feel offended. And he's one of the first characters that were there, right? I mean, he's one of the original characters.
He's the original character, yeah.
That's far up.
Who are they going to put in? I mean, James Woods. He had a small part as the tightly wound convenience store worker, right? So I had to frame his role correctly then. So, but who are they going to put in his place? It's like if you were to get a cab in New York. Are you going to get in New York a fully English-speaking person that was born and bred in New York as a New Yorker? Right? Are you going to get one of them? If you go to any Quickie Mart like 7-Eleven equivalent, right? That's where they're basically poking fun at. If you go to any one of those Quickie Marts around the planet, who's going to work there? Who are you going to find there? So is this, while that's, I'm bringing this out as a stereotype, right? That we have stereotypes, we do it in movies all the time. Is there really a need? I don't think there's a need. And Matt Groening's going to get an email from me if it gets past his PR, and I'm gonna dislike the choice that maybe they've been forced into.
I don't think it's him.
I don't think it would be him because he created him in the first place. He'd be going, what? He'd be doing the same thing. I have a pencil in my nose.
Sleep. That's why I'm a Viking. No, look, look. The Simpsons are awesome, but to make a point about something you said earlier, I don't think it's two teams, Dave.
Me to burn things.
I like to eat ouchie. But
the purple berries taste like burning.
This is the moment where his heart breaks. Choo. Oh, this can go on. This could be the Simpson hour. No, it's not. I don't think there's two teams, Dave. I think there's a number of. I mean, there's just. It looks like it, but they're not. They're not two camps. This is not going to be a. This is not going to be bilateral conflict like the Cold War. We're looking at a whole new thing. We're looking at a situation more akin to I guess the late 19th century, early 20th century, where there's many power blocks, emerging powers, declining powers, it really isn't like it is after World War II, where you have two very clear and clearly defined power blocks. You had the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact on the one side, and all the attendant countries they tried to influence, and you had the NATO alliance with America and the lead on the other, and they were very clearly defined. And any conflict from, let's say, 1940, even 45, 46, up until 1990, any conflict in the world you could boil down to a power play between the Soviet Union and the United States of America.
Of course,
right?
So in World War II, we saw a few alliances take place, and a few different power players.
Yeah.
So Italy had its own and joined with Germany. Japan had its own agenda, taking advantage of the situation, right? Really? And then the rest of the allies trying to fight everyone. Russia didn't want to really ally with anyone, but it was keeping its front solid.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, it's even worse just before World War I, where there were secret alliances, and there were alliances upon alliances, and there was no clear-cut power block. Because so what happened is Serbia.
What was
so
the
Serbians
before
killed?
then?
Yeah. So the Serbians killed the Archduke. I mean, it was just an excuse. But anyway, so they killed him, and the Austrians said, "Oh, we're going to march into Serbia," asking the Germans, "Is it okay if we do that?" Germans go, "Yeah, knock yourself out, whatever." So they had an alliance, right? And then the Serbians had an alliance with Russia, right? Because they're all Slavic, nations. So the Austrians move in, and as soon as they move into Serbia, the Russians declare war on the Austrians. In turn, the Germans declare war on the Russians because they declared war on the Austrians. And then, but nobody knew is that the English and the French had a pact with the Russians, who now declared war against Germany and Austria. And Turkey was in a pact with Germany and declared war on everybody. Right, and then the Americans came in, Johnny come latelys, whatever. But the point is that all these it's like a domino effect. It triggered and everything, trigger. And one of the major outcomes, diplomatically speaking, they tried to outlaw secret treaties. That's why they established the League of Nations and exactly, United Nations. So they're no more. At least everything was out in the open, with the NATO alliance and the Warsaw Pact and all that. Everybody knew what was what. But look, Dave, it's a really interesting. It's a very chaotic time, and at the moment.
Wasn't that when we created superheroes?
I think it's about the right time. Yeah.
It was around about the right time, because you know what? They can solve it.
Yeah, they can fix it.
That's the call. That's the call for someone else to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, it's too hard. Just invent some mythical creature that can fix it all. God probably falls in the same. Oh, I shouldn't say that. That's bad. Bad Mackie. Bad.
You're gonna get mailed for that one.
No, I get deleted for that one. Yeah, look, it is interesting to see the developments, and today certainly we're seeing a similarly chaotic time emerging, especially with the withdrawal of America from the international stage. There's a whole caravan of South Americans moving toward the American border, the southern border, of course. And Donald Trump has sent several thousand U.S. troops, regular troops, to the border. Now, this is interesting because the thing is this: the U.S. troops are not actually allowed to do anything on U.S. soil.
That was changed.
Oh,
there was a law, like an executive order that was pushed through to allow. Right. That wasn't during his stay, though. That was Obama's stay.
Really, the Posse Comitatus has been suspended?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
They could deploy. Someone in the chat room correct us if we're wrong, but I swear that that's what I understand to be the truth. Is that can you restate the Latin again?
Posse Comitatus. Posse Comitatus.
Yeah, I'm sure that was repealed, and that U.S. troops could be deployed on U.S. soil.
Wow, I got to research that. I wasn't aware, because that's a huge thing. That's a massive thing. That's incredible. Yeah. That would. But anyway, look, if that's the case, then I got to double check that though. But that would be horrific. Interesting. And just to let everybody know, it's an hour back. The time goes an hour back, so it goes from 3 a.m. to 2 a.m. That's the daylight saving that you're going into. You're going into winter, which means you can sleep an hour longer. We did the opposite, and we got an hour less. Daylight saving, by the way, completely useless in this day and age. We no longer burn candles. We have electricity now.
But my
It's
curtains
no-
will fade, Meki, without
Yes,
it.
they will fade. Yes, that's true. Yes. Look,
I'm sorry. That was actually one of the arguments in
I
Australia
know.
for
I know the
just letting people in America know, right? That
People
was one
are
of the
more-
arguments to keep it, and
morons.
it clearly fell on deaf ears, but
It fell on no ears.
on no ears. Look, Meki,
Anyway,
posse comitatus, whoever, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution or Act of Congress, willfully uses any part of the Army or the Air Force as a posse comitatus or otherwise to execute the laws shall be fined under this title or
Yes.
imprisoned not more than
Correct.
2 years or both. Yeah, so
Yeah, but
there's some
I can't-
exclusions, and I think that
No, but I
they built the
it
exclusions
hasn't been-
in during the
but it hasn't been
Patriot
repealed.
Act.
no, but it hasn't been repealed. I'm pretty sure.
I'm
just
sure,
looking
I'm
at
not
it
sure
now.
that it was repealed, but I'm sure that what they did, that they've changed it, because there's a lot of people talking about it.
Well, there's nothing here that says the last change to it was made in 1981, major amendment. Nothing since then.
Just
Look, it doesn't matter. But the point is,
All right.
if they had changed it, that'd be horrific, in my opinion, because that's one thing you shouldn't be able to do: deploy troops, because that's what the British did. The British deployed troops against their own people in their own country. That's what the Americans said. Nah, we're not going to do that because that's just wrong. But anyway, I want to see what happens when those tens of thousands of people get to the American border. By the way, just in case you didn't realize, when we spoke about this last time, we said they're going to be climate refugees. It turns out, Dave sent me this little snippet on news.
that's right.
It turns out that a whole bunch of these South American refugees, let's call them, or displaced people, or whatever you're going to call them, I don't care, they are actually leaving their specific locations because of well, the weather. Now, is the weather the primary factor? No, but the knock-on effect. So they had really bad weather or droughts and whatever, so that gave them a bad crop. They had a huge knock-on effect on the economy. Economy is going nose diving into the ocean, as it were. And all of a sudden, you've got people that have no way to sustain themselves. The economy is going belly up, and they can't even grow enough. Subsistence farming is no longer possible because the weather is so bad, right? It's just a drought. And what do? Well, if an area on the planet, this has happened hundreds of times in the past, thousands of times over the last, hundreds of thousands of years, people pack up and leave. If an area becomes uninhabitable, you would be insane to stick around. Right? You don't stick around somewhere where you can't live. It just doesn't happen. So what do? They pack up and off they go. And that's what's happened here. And we're going to see more of it coming out of Africa, coming out of Asia, I'm sure, Central Asia especially. It's happened in the past. It's not new. It'll happen again, and it's happening a lot right now. So we are seeing climate refugees. It's a thing. It's a worry.
I'm going to say it again. Say it right here, right now. You're absolutely right. The climate refugees is a thing, and I know that in England that they've written constitutional changes which prevents their borders from being crossed in England, right, from Europe. They've isolated themselves from a similar caravan. We have a water boundary which it protects us from a significant migration of people. If you're a land border with someone, you must around the world, you must consider the next movement of people. This is the thing that paleontologists are going to be discussing at some point in our future about these great migrations of people for some reason.
That's it. The thing is this, right? These massive displaced populations have happened in the past, and that's why we have, I guess, the genetic makeup we have these days. People move around. It just happens. They don't just stick around in some place. Sometimes, wars can displace them. Climate changes, economic viability. This is always something that makes people move, and we're seeing this today. We think we are immune from it. We think we exist outside of the natural order. Nothing could be further from the truth. And this is really a problem, a general problem. Then I will stop philosophizing. But the larger problem we're facing here, we're looking at ourselves as somehow apart from everything we are looking at. So the human race is somehow apart from everything. So this is probably the most critical mistake we're making. This is probably the most significant downfall for us, where we think that we are completely isolated from all the systems we live in. We are very much a part of everything. And there's a funny thing. I listened to a science report the other day that said that Parkinson's disease starts in your gut. There's a protein, and I can't remember the name of the protein, but you need it for brain function. Okay, you need this protein for brain function, but this protein is produced in your gut, so it travels up into the brain, and it's needed for normal brain function. But something goes wrong in your gut, and the protein is twisted in the wrong way. And you might notice proteins actually have an interesting structure, but this one is twisted in the wrong way. So the wrong protein, the right protein twisted in the wrong way goes up into your brain and starts damaging your brain, and eventually, leads to full onset of Parkinson's disease. And people were astounded. I mean, it's the body. If you blow off your leg, there'll be an impact to the rest of the body. If you inject heroin in your toe, there's going to be an impact to the rest of your body. I find it astounding that we are so blown away by these I guess, connections. Yeah, that's right. It's just astounding, Dave. I mean, think about it. I mean, this is our organism, our body, our physical body. Of course, it's all connected. Blood is going through it. Our nerves are going. Electricity core. The body is a thing that is completely interdependent. If you shut your liver off, it'll lead to death. Oh, what? What, the liver? Oh, what a shock! No, it's and then if you do this, then it has a knock-on effect over here. Oh, wow. We really have to change the way we look at the world in scientific terms.
Senility is or has been now connected with diet. And
yes.
The Western diet is particularly hideous.
Yes.
And a cause. And so my family, who, Irish, Russian, and Dutch heritage, who have all lived on starch products, have found that this generation, in this modern era, generationally, has a really hard time with it, with the same products. And those those ketosis diets.
Yes.
Our family has tremendous success on that specific diet. Now it's a grains diet, believe it or not, wholly grains and high fat, because you don't get fat from fat. You get fat from eating too much protein and too much starch or carbs. So this information for me goes against everything that we've been taught in the food pyramid and all this business, right? Interestingly enough, it's also leads, if you don't correct your diet, the senility factor of requiring locked care, because it's like that 5-second bob from 50 First Dates. That guy who can't remember anything, his short-term memory is in a loop, and it's a very tight loop, and he'll just be like the old goldfish in a bowl, swimming a loop and then introducing himself again. So the same ketosis diet, if you're susceptible to that with your DNA, is, and I've been told this secondhand, but it's as good as firsthand, and that assists in the reduction of the likelihood of becoming senile, or worse still, having sundowners. The Western diet's a killer, and we should be really careful of it.
I agree. That's true.
And remember,
having said that, ketosis has its own issues.
It has its own issues, yes.
If you eat fat all the time and animal products, animal like meat and such, yes, it will cause ketosis, which means you're going to burn body fat, which is really the aim here. It might have other health benefits, but long term, your arteries are still going to clog. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's a load on your organs. So look, we don't know. We don't have the long-term data, but you've got to, I guess, display some common sense here and just think about it. I mean, for periods of time, I think it's an okay thing.
A balanced diet.
As a lifestyle choice, I'm not sure.
Yeah, as a balanced diet, trying not to eat too much of everything is probably the best way forward. Maggie, one of the things that I keep thinking about is we're so individualized now, where if we go back to, say, the Roman times, where they were, they didn't have toilet paper, and I shudder to think how disgusting it would have been to have to go to toilet in a shared toilet with just holes and a rag on a stick that was in a bucket, right? And you can only imagine what
a rag on a stick.
A rag on a stick. The rag on a stick was used to clean yourself post use of this shared toilet experience. There's some kind of weird benefit though, because they're finding now, there's findings out where science has been examining this, and you talked about this at the beginning of this discussion about your gut, and your gut, your flora, the living creatures that are in, we have a symbiotic relationship with the creatures that are in our gut. Yeah, the life forms in our gut provide us the nutrients. We don't get the nutrients directly from the food. They break it down and provide us with a whole bunch of amino acids and etc. Right? It's not a direct one-to-one. And if we didn't have them, we wouldn't be alive. So this flora that we have is from being transplanted from healthy people into people who aren't healthy. I won't give you the mechanism in which it's done because it's probably not favourable for radio, but you can just imagine.
Oh, you can imagine. I mean, they actually do a stool transplant.
That's a stool transplant.
That's what they're doing.
Thank you, Maggie. That's the kindest way of saying it.
It is. It's the scientific way.
The scientific way, yeah. That's what it is. And so this can repopulate your flora with a well-balanced flora, and you can overcome some of what we would call the modern diet's worst problems. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's true. It's a fact.
It's
amazing.
Absolutely, yeah. It is a fact. It's amazing. It's a fact that it's amazing. It's a fact that it's true, and it's a fact that it's a fact.
And I think it just underlines the point we're making, that we cannot think of ourselves as outside the system. We are very much right smack bang in the middle of everything. We are part of this ecosystem, if we want to or not. Whatever happens here is going to have an effect on us, and so on and so forth, right? So it's really foolish to look at ourselves as divorced, and that's where science, in my mind, breaks down as well. I read an interesting article on quantum physics. Yes, that's right. And what it says is, in quantum systems, the more qubits, these are like the elementary parts of quantum computers. The more qubits you link together, the less quantum the system becomes, because you have more. It becomes bigger. That's essentially the point here. It becomes more macro, or it goes into the what we like to call the real experiential world, and that's true. That's true. I mean, but it doesn't negate the quantum effects. It says that we should completely ignore the quantum effects. My brother actually showed me this article. It's a different article now, where the person says, quantum effects are completely irrelevant, because because everything is observed all the time. No, incorrect. It is very important. It's very important because they happen. Quantum effects are real. We've proven them experimentally, right? Experientially as well, but certainly experimentally we have proven the quantum effects. Perfectly cromulent. No, but we've proven it. We know that these quantum effects are real, and
that's right.
And fundamentally, that's what makes up our reality. Yes, as you go to the macro level, for some reason those effects seem to coalesce or dissipate, if you will. But I believe that's because we are observing the universe all the time, expecting a certain outcome. I know this is going to get all
expensive. And it provides that expectation back to us in a collapsed reality.
Correct. Now, now people make the argument, oh, you don't need a sentient mind to observe the outcome of the double slit experiment, for argument's sake, because that's probably the best case study there is for it. Yes, you do. And as soon as you measure it, right, and then someone looks at that measurement, that's when the experiment gives you a certain outcome. If nobody ever looks at it, right, doesn't look at the measurement at the point of the experiment's actual verification, if you will, then we get the other outcome. But it has to be measured and then looked at. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you don't measure it, clearly no one is looking at it, you get an outcome, right? But if you measure it, no one looks at it, you get the same outcome as if no one had measured it.
Mackie, I wonder if we could teach a chimp to recognize an interference pattern or the double slit pattern, and to make a specific sound based on what it observed.
See, this is where it becomes interesting. So at what point is a mind considered sentient, or in fact, I read a science fiction story around that where they actually did exactly that. They had trained chimps, and it just fell apart because when the chimps looked at it, nothing happened, right? So that was just a story. That was a story, right? So then clearly there was the observer, or the effect that the observer has. It's only valid if it's a human being, maybe a dolphin, right? But it has to have a certain level of self-awareness and sentience, or what we call sentience. So we live in a universe that collapses according to our expectations, because there's so many of us, and maybe not just us, but maybe there are billions of sentient species that are caught in this reality for this very purpose, to keep this reality existing, right? I mean, who knows what the number is? I mean, we can't be anthropomorphic and think that we are the pinnacle of everything and it's all about us. There could be another billion or trillion species out there that have the same purpose as us, like call it, an infinite redundancy, to make sure this universe doesn't blink out of existence, as it were, and to keep us here for some reason. I mean, to keep us here, but the reason cannot just be the perpetuation of this universe. There must be some other thing that is going on. I think I could be wrong. It could all be about self-perpetuation. Who knows?
I think of a wonderful. Go ahead, Mackie. Finish your point.
No. That's it.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking of a wonderful story where everyone during their night sleep cycle were taken and placed in an environment which was of an exact copy. I keep thinking of this all the time. It's like they're all virtualized while they slept, and they never rewoke again. They only woke in the artificial environment. So at some point in history, looking back, they were virtualized, right? From a real place, and that they don't know any different. And at that point, that's why this experiment does what it does, because it's in a virtual environment and it knows that you're looking at it regardless of whether you have instruments or not. Does it make sense? That whole double slit thing is so tremendous and such a mind blower that if you honestly don't know what we're talking about, research it, because it means everything. It is the basis of most of our discussions.
Yeah,
it
is. Go on.
I wanted just to say the comment that I wrote into our private chat, and that is that we've cleaned our own environment so much that we've created some of the worst bacteria that exists because we cleaned it. If we hadn't have cleaned it, we wouldn't have golden staph, for instance.
That's right.
More people would have died, but we wouldn't have golden staph.
Correct. We were very rash in using a whole bunch of different things, antibiotics, cleaning. I mean, whenever you clean your counter with an antiseptic, it says 99.99% of bacteria will be killed. That leaves 0.0001 of whatever of the bacteria alive, which are now immune to that particular antiseptic, whatever it is, right? So you're right, Dave. You're 100% correct. This problem is of our making. It is we created this issue, and certainly our overprescription of antibiotics I mean, it was seen antibiotics was the panacea of its time, right? It was like, oh wow, infections are no longer an issue.
You don't have to die if you cut yourself shaving.
Yeah, but people did, right? So people died of infections all the time. It was a big thing. But now we might be entering an era where this becomes a problem again, which is of course horrendous. How do you stop it? Well, the ideal thing, if we could isolate each other, or we could be isolated geographically from each other, so we can't spread these bacteria around. It's not likely to happen, not really. But I wanted to make one more point before I'd like to go into the show notes, because we are going to talk about death, or we have talked about death, resurrection, and Christmas, because we're getting into the season. And last week we did manage to finish, death and the definition of death and so forth. And today we're going to look at why we die. We had a whole show on this, but I think it doesn't hurt to go into this again and talk about telomeres for a second, and also protein, which is a different protein. But so we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about Christmas, because our resurrection first, but then Christmas, because Christmas fundamentally is not what you think it is, unless you've listened to us before. This show we did about 5-6 years ago, Christmas show. It's just not a it's not a common thing that people know about. The one thing I do want to say is about our age. We die too young. Even if you live to 150, you still die too young. We're never given the chance to grow up. We die as children. And if you look at human history, you look at how we act and treat each other, it's what children do. I mean, really young children, but we never actually grow out of that stage. We never given the chance to mature. But you look really old and wrinkly. Yeah, that's true. That's aging. It's got nothing to do with the actual mental age, right? So your body shows signs of senescence, which is aging, and your mind ages as well as a result, because your brain functions decrease. But imagine that aging process did not happen. Imagine it didn't happen, and you stayed healthy and clear-minded for thousands or tens of thousands of years. I know a lot of people will go, oh, you're crazy. Clearly everybody only lives to 100 years. But who says that's what it is? Yes, that's what we're living in. That's the condition we're in. Yes, I agree. But who says that there has to be a limit? We are now unlocking as to why this is happening. We understand telomeres. We understand telomerase. We understand all of that. Okay, we get it. It doesn't have to happen, but it happens. So in my book, Dave, it's a kill switch. We have a built-in kill switch, which ages us. Even if you're not killed violently, eventually you will die because your body simply deteriorates. What is the evolutionary advantage in having a body that deteriorates? Well, there isn't one. Especially if you're looking at spacefaring civilizations, or civilizations that, can build Dyson spheres and all those wonderful things. Eventually we could develop into the air, and then there's actually no point in dying anymore. What's the point of, there's so much more you could do, right? And if you only live 100 and 150 years at the maximum, then that's, you could never fully realize your potential. And we don't, none of us do. None of us ever fully realize our potential because we're not given the time to grow up. Okay, we're dying if our lifespan could be tens or hundreds of thousands of years, and you die in your first 100 years, it's like a toddler, right? We're toddlers at best. Yeah. Oh, we're clever. We're very clever. Don't get me wrong, but we never reach wisdom, really. We never reach intellectual maturity. We never look. Not many of us look at the greater good, right? Not really. I think that some of us who are aware of the rebirthing cycle and actually retain their memories, and I think there are a few of them, they can reach this mental maturity because they don't lose it all as they're reborn into a new body. So every 100 years you die, you're born into a new body, everything is wiped clean, you start again. If you had the opportunity to retain all your memories and the experiences throughout thousands of lifetimes, it'll be the same effect as if you didn't die at all. And in my opinion, much preferred state of affairs. But there's only a few, I think, of those people that can actually remember stuff through their reincarnation cycles. And some of us, maybe I shouldn't say us, never die at all. I reckon there's an elite of people that is out there today and has been with us for a very long time indeed, and they haven't died because they're completely aware of what it takes to stay alive. Okay? Civilizations come and go. civilizations like ours have been here before, probably reaching higher levels of achievement, technologically, scientifically, whatever you want to call it, right? Culturally even, than the ones we have today. Somebody built the pyramids, okay? And if we are right, then somebody built the moon. Oh, that's crazy talk, Mackie. Stop, please. You're hurting my eyes and brain and my sensibilities. Forget your sensibilities. Forget what you've learned. Question everything. Turn everything on its head. Do not accept at face value anything that people tell you, unless it makes sense to you. Please. Could we build the pyramids today? Probably not. Okay. Could we move the stones at Baalbek? No, we can't. Not really. I mean, first of all, it wouldn't be economically viable. Could we build a crane that can lift 1,000-ton stone? Yes, we could. We could. But the question would have to be asked, why would you want to lift 1,000-ton stone? It's insane. And it would stretch us. It would push us right to our engineering abilities today, right? It would be right at the edge of it. So today, there's no crane in the world that could lift that weight. You could build one, but it would really be stretching us. And then another thing is,
why on earth you'd want to move something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Why do you need 1,000-ton stone?
And then, how did they do it?
Yeah. And when it comes to stones like that, granite specifically, right? Once you've carved it, let's say you've carved this, and they're big things that you've seen the pictures of Baalbek, I'm sure. If not, just Google it. They're quite impressive. If there's the slightest imperfection, a slight fissure or crack in that stone, it's useless. Yeah? So you have to carve this thing very carefully and make sure that whatever piece you've carved is actually completely structurally intact. Okay? It has structural integrity. That's important as well to remember. It doesn't collapse under its own weight. It doesn't have any cracks in it, right? Like I said. Okay? So you have to. So why would you ever need 1,000-ton stone? I mean, we can build buildings, that look like they're 1,000-ton stone, but it's like Lego. We put things together. Even the Romans used concrete, believe it or not, right? But we know for a fact that people in prehistory moved 1,000-ton stones. Why is the question? Why? Clearly, I don't care who you are and how much you know and all this. Even if you're much more advanced than we, it's still an effort to do that. Unless, of course, they would say, well, that's just what we do. It's our thing. I mean, it's nothing special. We just carve it out and then we move it over here. Like what? You can't do that, all right? And that to me denotes a level of technical sophistication which we haven't even come close to. Not yet.
Exactly. And if they're doing it routinely, what did we miss out on? Like, what did we miss?
Absolutely.
What don't we know?
Yeah. And then to be clear, there has been some excellent research done by someone over the years. The Romans did not move those stones. They couldn't move those stones. We've spent a lot of time explaining it on in the previous show cycle, but the Romans did not have the technical know-how to cut and move stones of that magnitude. They didn't.
Not even that spire. The stone that they cut it around for a while, then they went, you know what, we're just going to cut it in half.
Yeah, it's the obelisk that they tried to move from Egypt to Rome. It took them like years to get it, and then they decided, no, it's just too hard. Let's cut it up and move it, right? So just to be clear, this is what happened. But look, we do have a couple more minutes. What we're going to share with you is why do we die again? It's a nice refresher on the show we just had probably a couple months ago. We're going to go through that, and then hopefully we'll get into some of the telomere discussion, which is interesting. We'll talk about some protein, and we can then hopefully also make into a resurrection. We might not, but it's all a lead into Christmas, because at Christmas we have to ask ourselves the fundamental questions. I mean, what are we celebrating at Christmas? We're celebrating if you're Christian, you're celebrating the birth of your Savior, the birth of Christ, and it's really important to understand that that's what the celebration is. Of course, if you're not Christian, you might be celebrating Hanukkah, or you might be celebrating the winter solstice, because in the northern hemisphere, that's where it is. December 25th is the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, and in fact, the sun is at its lowest point on the horizon as well. So the different things that are being celebrated, and then that leads into Easter, which is a whole different connotation again, right? But you have to understand that Christmas is not an original Christian holiday. Christmas is a pagan tradition. So again, celebrating, the winter solstice, and the Romans had something called the Saturnalia. Saturnalia, a time at which all crimes were permitted. It's somewhat reminiscent of the Purge movies and the Purge TV series now, where all crimes were permissible for a period of time. I guess to it's like a safety valve, if you will, right? So it was quite a thing. But this gift giving and so forth, that goes way back. I mean, because it is the winter solstice, I think we have been celebrating December 25th for tens of thousands of years. Christians simply incorporated it, right? And I think the people that are still around, this is what I'm saying, the immortals, if you will, I think you get used to certain things. Me personally, I love Christmas. Okay, I love it because of the feeling it gives me when I was a child. It's a lot of memories for me, which are happy. Am I a staunch believer in what it represents for Christians? Well, not really. No, I'm not. Right? I like the idea of it. I like the idea that it's a time where you should be good to each other and celebrate family and all that wonderful things. But do I believe in the birth of the Savior at that time? No, I do not. I do not. That's me, right? But I do like Christmas. Okay, and I love it, and I'd like to celebrate it. Same with Easter and others. But Christmas for me holds a very special place, irrespective of its religious connotations. But I do respect the religious connotations as well, right? But we need to understand, though, the origins and how things come about, and that a lot of the traditions incorporated into Christmas are actually of pagan origin. Pagan meaning, pre-Christian. I do believe that the immortals also have a special spot for Christmas. That's why I'm grouping all of this together: death, resurrection, immortality, and then Christmas. And that's why they have, I guess, tried hard to keep it a thing. From the winter solstice festivals of the pagans, thousands of years ago, then to the Saturnalia of the Romans, and then into the Christmas celebrations. In fact, Christmas originally was opposed by the faithful massively. The church opposed the celebration of Christmas because it was a pagan holiday, right? And you talk about Santa Claus and all those wonderful things. They're all fairly recent additions. The gift giving and the celebration has always been around, but the tree, mistletoe, we're going to talk about all of that and how it came to be. It's just good to understand it. I think you should. I'm not disrespecting anyone, but I think it's important if you have a conversation, okay, to understand what's what, okay, and not just make statements, into thin air, which are actually completely unfounded in reality. How do you feel about Christmas Day?
I like what it's become with Santa Claus and the gift giving and the non-selfishness that comes from giving. I think that's so important, and if we didn't have it, we would have created it anyway today. If there was no birth of the Savior connectivity to it, if there wasn't already something going on at the winter solstice, and I think someone would have created this, a selfless, gift-giving experience. So we have Thanksgiving still with its origins in the US, certainly celebrated everywhere, which some people may say who have to go through it. It's a warm up for Christmas, having the family again, and having to cook. It's like a dry run. But it's got its own issues. I think the Coca-Cola connection with Christmas and Santa Claus has made an event of it, but because it doesn't lie mid-year, or mid-season, or it's a solstice, that we can't globally celebrate it in the same way. So in Australia, we can't have like a roast turkey and the whole thing because it's way too hot to be baking anything in your house. All right, we'll have salads and maybe a barbecue and beer, and we'll be outside. See, that sounds like it's in strict contrast with your experience in the US, where it's probably snowing. It's a pleasure to be seated in a house that's had a turkey cooking in it, baking in that house for a while. It smells to be so delicious. We don't want to be in a house like that without air conditioning on, sucking all those smells out and purifying the air, right? If it were, say, spring or autumn and the temperature was unified across the planet, there's the
music is coming.
Then I think there might be something else to it, right? That's my opinion anyway. I enjoy it. I think it's for the kids mostly. But stay tuned. We're gonna still be here the third hour. We're gonna be here. Take a toilet break. Use the station break, and use it to donate to the station. And we'll see you shortly.
Who express them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Guess what? This is the third hour of Shiny Side Out. That's my pirate voice. You know what? Hawk's right. This isn't a one listener talk radio on the net. We wouldn't be part of it if it wasn't. And it is. And thank you, Hawk. Get yourself into the chat room so you can chat with us while we're on air. And do that. Talk to us while we're on air. I just posted, from the discussion we had earlier, I posted the Jumpy Jack ant images there so you can have a look. It looks, I pasted the wrong link and it looked like a Bitcoin blockchain URL. It's very funny, so apologies for that. You know, the chat room, you have to scroll past that whopping great text. It's actually the actual image itself, so my bad. I didn't realize I had to do some URL coding around it, so I did that. Thanks, Hawk, for clearing it. Now, there's a number of things that you can do to support the station, and it's very important you do. You can make a donation, just a flat-out donation. You can do a one-off. You can do a repeated donation, like a monthly. You can become a subscriber to the archives. That helps. You can do a one-off, but follow the instructions for a gift in return. So you're actually just buying a gift for yourself, like an MP3 proof, an EMP proof thumb drive with survival documents. There's different things on at different times. There is also seed packs, but watch out for your customs department may halt it. If you live in Australia, we can't import seeds, so that's a no-no. USB sticks are fine. When there's something on a specific thing, like a promotion, Nighthawk will let all the hosts know. There was like a pen knife recently. There's other knives that you can get. So follow the instructions of the website, www.revolution.radio. It's really easy. Go there, go to the donate part, have a look in there, and don't forget in the little comments field, describe what it is and your address details so he can ship that out to you. Anyway, so we would normally read the station number, but look, we've got a lot to get through. We have only one more hour, the third hour, right? Yes, excellent.
Indeed. So, Dave, you're right. That's correct. Having said that, why do we die, Dave? Why do we die?
Why do we die?
Why?
We're programmed to die, Mickey.
That's the truth.
Is
we
that
are
the
indeed.
place where I'm at?
Close. It's good. In 1786, average life expectancy was 24. 24, right? So 24 years. 1786, average. people lived longer. Franklin, Washington, James Cook was eaten. In case you didn't know, James Cook was eaten by cannibals.
Sandwich Islands.
At the Sandwich Islands. How is that funny? What is in your bread? Oh, I like to call it the Cook sandwich. No, that's not right.
HB
Still hasn't. Right. 100 years later, in 1886, it doubled to 48. You know, advancements in medicine and science and so forth, right? And when this article was written, which was about, I think, 10 years ago, a newborn can expect to live in the developed world, mind you, America, Australia, Europe, Singapore even, to live an average of 76 years. I think men don't live as long as women. I think women have a slightly higher life expectancy. With recent discoveries in biology, many scientists predict that life expectancy will continue to triple digits, so well into the hundreds, right? In fact, if they're correct, humans shouldn't have to die at all in the future. Okay, now we spoke about this 6 years ago. This is the article from 6 years ago. Okay, and then we did a lot of research in the meantime, and even for the show back then. And I'm going to quote a couple of things here. Over half the baby boomers in America are going to see their 100th birthday and beyond in excellent health. We're looking at lifespans for the baby boomers and then a generation after the baby boomers of 120 to 150 years of age. And that was Dr. Ronald Klutz of the American Academy of Anti-Aging. I don't think that baby boomers necessarily, look, they could. I mean, they're retiring right now. The baby boomers are retiring right now. The next generation is me, Gen X, and Dave, we're Gen Xers. And then we got a whole bunch of others coming through. But yeah, look, if we look at science and how quickly science has been progressing, and forget Moore's law in the field of computer science, it's completely out the window. We're exponential now. It's possible. Once we really get cracking with the genetic code. And Dave, did you hear? They are now they're launching. I think it's going to cost them $5 or $6 or $7 billion. They're launching a scientific undertaking to unravel all DNA of all living organisms. So all the DNA in all the living organisms today is going to be coded or uncovered over the next few years. That they've now started that program. It's for conservation purposes and whatnot. But imagine the computing power it would take for that, and the storage requirements to
Sounds
do all
like
of
an
that.
arc, Mecky.
Dude, it's an arc.
It is
Of course
an
it's
arc.
100% it's an arc. But we couldn't have done this 10 years ago. Forget 50 years ago. I mean, we can now, in a matter of hours, we can map your DNA. See, there's this thing on the internet where you can get a swab, like the inside of your mouth. You swab it, you send it off, and you get a whole breakdown of your DNA, including your ancestors.
Even $50.
No, it's not. Now, it is still a huge undertaking to map every single species on the planet, but we are now in a position to actually do that. And we haven't even gotten to quantum computing yet. We haven't even looked at exotic materials or holographic storage or any of that stuff. That's still developing, right? It's still coming out. I mean, we've gone leaps and bounds into solid space, solid state storage, massively, right? I've got a terabyte hard drive, which is the size of half my wallet. It's the size of half my wallet. And I've got a terabyte of information on there. Well, give or take, right? But that's astounding if you think about it. Because I remember very clearly my very first personal computer, which I purchased in the beginning of the 90s, Dave. I was arguing with myself whether or not I should get whether I should get 16 or 32 megabytes of RAM. Might have been 8 or 16, one or the other. I can't remember.
That's right.
But will I ever use it? Will I ever need it? Will I?
And
was a significant price difference.
It had 20. It was like 20 meg, not even 20 gig of 200 meg hard drive or something, right? Mecky, the machine that's doing the reading is able to have fragments of DNA and reconstruct the whole thing based on the correct order in which they get joined back together again. So if you could find like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, but rather than just how the pieces interact with each other, you might find a whole nother layer where they're half like they're overlaid by half. You know, like you would make a brick wall with 2 bricks that have 1 brick over the join. Well, if the machine is smart enough to find the one that goes over the join, that shows that only those two pieces are actually joined together, and that's how it can do this DNA accumulation from fractions of DNA. Now, and I think this whole concept is an arc concept. Can I take the second quote?
Please, absolutely.
So Dr. Klatz, and I have to pronounce that with an emphasis. It does sound like Dr. Klutz. That'd be funny. I wonder if he changed his name. This is another quote from him, because he wouldn't get much business, right? As Klutz, Dr. Klutz.
Not zero, no business.
Hi, Dr. Nick. Anti-aging medicine is not about stretching out the last years of life. It's about stretching out the middle years of life and actually compressing those last few years of life so that diseases of aging happen very, very late in the life cycle, just before death, or do not happen at all.
That's really the key, right? Quality of life. That's what we're talking about here. It's no good living to 1,000 years and looking it, right? That's just not a thing that you want.
That would be so awful.
I had a rough 1,000 years there, have you? Yeah, I got some city miles on me, buddy. This is something that you don't want, right? It's not good. It is about, and in fact, all of the mythologies that you talk about here, Dave, right? They all talk about immortality combined with eternal youth, right? It's not like, oh, look at these old people, they're like 1,000,000 years old. Oh my God, look at their joints. No, we city miles, right? Yeah, we don't want to live like that. There's no point being immortal and old, like none. It's like it's. I mean, at that point, death is a release. I mean, the thing is this, right? I mean, we are aging, and there's an accumulation of things that go wrong with our bodies, and I feel it. I'm hitting 50 next year, and I'm not as sprightly as I used to be. I'm trying to stay in shape, but I tell you what, it's harder for the body to recover. It really is. I can no longer drink as much or eat as much either as I used to. It just cannot. But I seem to have a really high tolerance for coffee. That's strange. Anyway,
thank heaven for that.
Right, that's my saving grace. But it is completely unthinkable to live forever in a senile state, in a body that's shutting down, right? And it's really that body shutting down that we're trying to arrest here. And if you think about it, you're born and you live and you age and whatnot, but what's really, you only have 100 years, then your body gives out. That doesn't seem, and if you treat it badly, the body that is, then it'll go out even quicker, right? I mean, if you treat it like an amusement park rather than a temple, then you probably only live to 60, 70, maybe not even as long, because, right? It can happen, and so it is about quality of life, and modern science, and we're going to go into the article here in a second, tells us that we could have this quality of life. And all the immortals in history, nobody is telling us stories of immortals that were old and decrepit. The gods of the Babylonians, the gods of the Greeks, the Romans, they're all in Mount Olympus, another mountain, the Anunnaki that came from the sky, and actually what the name means. That's what it means. It's really interesting that they would retain youth as such, and once in a while they would choose human beings like Hercules or Heracles, we know him as well. I believe that what's the prophet that never came back? I can't think of his name, but in the Bible, someone went up into the sky never to come back. And then some of the stories of the fairies, when you stay in fairyland and 1,000 years or 100 years have passed on the surface. So these are all stories of another place and another probably time scale potentially as well. I think it's possible that the immortals are living in a bubble slightly out of shift, out of phase, which is why we don't see them all the time, which also explains UFO sightings or the strangeness of UFO sightings. Because if you think about it, If there's a spacecraft that's visible, then it should be visible. We should see them all the time, but we don't see them all the time. I think there have to be specific conditions for us being able to see them. I don't know what they all are, but it is possible that they're slightly out of phase. They're slightly shifted out of phase, which means that we only see them when they shift into phase, for example, right? Or when there's an accident, which is what happens, frequently as well. It's very interesting. And you're right, Dave. Where are the Igigi, the Watchers and this story of the Watchers predates the Bible by thousands of years, by the way. Okay, so Igigi, which we discovered again in detail in another show cycle, are the cousins, I guess, or maybe younger siblings of the Anunnaki, or that's the way they were treated. Not well, but not as badly as the humans who replaced them in the labor camps. But let's go back to the article. I mean, we always run on, and I hope that you guys find it interesting. But Dave and I, we follow our stream of consciousness, right? So we have a topic, and we try to stick to the topic as much as possible. But then our mind goes around, and other things come to mind. And I hope that you guys find it interesting, and then you can see some of the connections when we talk about things as well. It might give you an insight into how we come across things and how we think about them and how we evaluate them. Now, Dave and I obviously are not joined at the hip, and we think about things quite differently, and we are two very different people in many ways. But what unites us is this need to understand what's happening in our lives, what's happening overall in the world, what's happening to us and why and how, and then we try to put our intellect to good use and try to come up with some answers. I mean, because the thing is, this information is out there, right? But information is not enough. Okay, so there's data, which is a whole bunch of stuff, unrelated data points, if you will. Then you turn this data into information, which is good. Now you've got something meaningful that you can process, right? But that's still not enough. The information then has to go and become knowledge, and then eventually, hopefully, wisdom, right? And that's how you need to approach every problem. Just information alone is not enough. It's what you do with it, and how you slice and dice it, and then also how you apply it, which is where wisdom comes in, right? And this is what I hope we can help you guys with. Solaris was kind enough to draw a card for me during the 31st of October. Celebrations, and I don't want to offend anyone, so I'm just going to call it 31st of October celebrations. Mm-hmm. But she drew the owl for me, seeker of wisdom and all these wonderful things. And that's probably not a bad characterization. I'm not saying I have wisdom, but I'm certainly trying to seek it. I'm trying to build it. I'm trying to become wise. I'm very far from it. I'm very, very far from it. Right? I'm still very much a flawed human being, and a lot of my actions are informed by rash decisions and not wisdom, not wisdom at all. But we should strive, Dave. We should strive toward wisdom and to understand that. Okay, so there's a body of knowledge over here, which is awesome. So we've got the data. We turned it into information. It becomes useful, and that information is then becomes part of our knowledge complex, right? But just because we have it doesn't mean we have to use it. That's what Einstein said during the creation of the atomic bomb, right? In Los Alamos, I think it was. Do we have to do this? We should. I mean, just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? I mean, again, this brings me back to the point. I know it's all circular here. That we are children. We can't help ourselves. We do not have the wisdom to stop ourselves. We cannot. And again, this is a characteristic of children. We cannot comprehend, or we cannot conceive of the consequences. And even if we can, we dismiss them. Right, Dave?
The same thing's going to happen with AI, Mekki. Just
Yeah,
telling you right now.
I agree.
It'll be weaponized,
Of course.
even though we shouldn't. And
I just hope. Go on.
it will be unleashed as a weapon against their enemies.
Yes. Oh, yes. Absolutely. In fact,
Probably already
might not-
happening.
Yeah, well, there you go. Boom, right there.
Right.
I like Isaac Asimov as a writer. I like Arthur C. Clarke. I like the classics, right?
Mhm.
I do like a whole bunch of new writers as well. But in fact, I've got so many books. It's not even. I'm running out of shelf space yet again. But my point is that Asimov wrote about robots a lot, a lot, right? He has got the whole collection of stories and novels around robots and what what happened. The company was called, I think, General Robotics, or U.S. General Robotics, in his future stories, and he created the 3 laws of robotics.
That's right.
And in my naivety, when I was younger, I always liked to think, yeah, that makes sense. That having these 3 laws, which the first one is to preserve human life, the second one is not to let human life come to harm through inaction, and then the final one would be to preserve yourself as the robot if it doesn't contradict the law 1 and law 2.
However, the U.S. military said there's no reason for the first one.
Yeah, right.
Because we can't have like a robot killing machine if it can't kill anything. What's going to be a robot traffic cop, right?
Well,
Otherwise,
I mean, but this is the thing, right, Dave? I mean, let's talk. I mean, I'm sorry, we're derailing the topic yet again, but this is important.
There was a topic.
There's a topic. There still is, and it's all part of the topic. But let's take. I mean, anything we have invented, anything we have, anything. It doesn't matter what it is. Every last thing that we have or built can be used in a number of different ways.
Yeah.
It doesn't care, right? How it's used. Electricity, right? Electricity is I guess it's a concept that's easy to understand because we can see it, we can feel its effect. We see lightning. But harnessing it turned out to be a lot more difficult than we thought, but we finally accomplished that as well, which is great. So what does electricity do for us? Well, pretty much everything. We are an electrical society. Okay, the only reason we burn coal is to produce electricity. The only reason we have nuclear power plants is to produce electricity.
We couldn't stop using it.
No, we're addicted. So people say you're addicted to oil. Well, no, we're addicted to electricity. If you take electricity away tomorrow, right? Imagine the society. Nothing. It goes back to the Stone Age immediately, right? So this is really the key thing to understand. We are an electrical society, 100%, through and through. What does that mean? Well, we've used it for all kinds of things. Now we're using it to light a room, to run our computers, to heat, to cool, right? To run our machines, to produce our food, to do everything. We also use it to kill. We invented the electric chair because, oh, hey, too much electricity will kill you. Okay, well, clearly lightning strikes are evidence. We weaponize that. Electricity itself doesn't care. Electricity is a force of nature. And, well, like a rock. You can use a rock to, draw something on a wall, right? I mean, it's a kind of rock. Or you can use the rock to smash someone in the head. It is us. It's our intent that shapes the outcome. Nothing else. There's no evil electricity. There's no evil rock. By the same, if you extend this, there's no evil gun. None of that. The problem is not the thing or the force. It's us. We are the problem. Okay, again, I'm coming back to the point that we're never allowed to grow up. We're children playing with atomic energy. Do you think that's a good idea?
Way.
I know, right?
You did it. But I didn't know how you're going to get there.
Huh? But we are. We're children playing with atomic energy. Now,
absolutely. But how do we stop being children? That's a big question, right?
Dave, why don't you tell us what Dr. Langmore is telling us?
All right. So the cause of what we call aging is now being understood. Immortality has silently been revealing itself to scientists like Dr. John Langmore of the University of Michigan's Department of Biology. Dr. Langmore and his group looked inside human cells at the very essence of human life, the DNA molecule specifically. Dr. Langmore looked at the tips of the DNA molecule, a previously overlooked part of the double helix molecule, by the way, that contain a kind of chain of repeating pairs of enzymes. Now, these are called telomeres. And these molecular chains have often been compared to the blank leaders of film and recording tape. Indeed, telomeres seem to perform a similar function. You can also liken them to the tips of your shoelaces, those little plastic caps that protect it from unraveling. It's a simile rather than a complete resemblance. Okay, so during the replication of the spiral DNA molecule, it must split in half and reassemble a copy of itself, protecting the vital DNA molecule from being copied out of sync. Telomeres provide a kind of buffer zone where misalignments, which are inevitable, will not result in any of the important DNA code being lost. Like the zipper, having to zip your zipper if it doesn't sort of all line up properly, you're going to be in trouble. So perhaps the best analogy to compare the telomeres to white margins surrounding an important type of written document, in this analogy, the printed text is the vital DNA code while the white space is the blank telomeres. Imagine that this paper is repeatedly slapped on a copy machine, a copy is made, and then that copy is used to make another copy. Each time the paper is subject to errors of alignment, and these errors accumulate. After enough copying, it is probable that the white space will diminish, and some of the actual text will not be copied. That's what happens inside our cells, and it is the reason we get old and die. I'm sorry to punctuate that entire bit of information with the word die. But it's important. As any cells get older, it is under attack by oxides and free radicals in the body and the environment. We survive as living beings because our cells have the ability to duplicate and replicate themselves before being killed by these natural causes. Each time our cells divide, the DNA molecule makes a copy of itself. But the procedure is very complex and not perfect. Usually, a small portion of the DNA molecule is lost, misalignment, and not copied. Since errors are more frequent on the ends of the DNA molecule, this area, the telomere, does not contain any important information and the effect is insignificant. However, I have to say that the telomeres shorten in every copy.
Yes.
Mackie.
And this is now we're coming to the crux of it, the telomeres. Not our words, this is from the article, Programmed to Die. Telomeres, programmed to die. Now, scientists observed that the length of telomere chains becomes shorter as we grow older, as Dave has pointed out. Eventually, the telomeres become so short that cell replication produces lethal errors or missing pieces in the DNA sequence, ending the cell's ability to replace itself. And we see this as aging, gray hairs, white hairs, wrinkles, lack of vision in your eyes, things like that. This point, when the cell has lost vital DNA code and cannot reproduce, is called the Hayflick limit. Hayflick limit. It's the measure of how many times a cell can copy itself before it dies. Some cells in our body have a very high Hayflick limit. Cells that line the inside of your mouth and intestines, for example, are constantly being worn away and replaced. So that means, right, that not all cells in our body age at the same rate, or experience telomere degeneration at the same rate. Indeed, these cells appear to have the ability to regrow telomeres even in aged bodies. Scientists were curious why some cells shut down telomere growth with age and some do not. Dr. Langmore used physical, biochemical, and genetic techniques to study the structure and function of telomeres. His group developed a cell-free system to reconstitute functional model telomeres using synthetic DNA and studied the mechanism by which telomeres normally stabilize chromosomes and how shortening of the telomeres could cause instability. The protein factors responsible for stabilizing the ends of chromosomes are being identified, cloned, and studied. Electron microscopy is used to directly visualize the structure of the model telomeres, so we can actually look at them now with the electron microscope. That's awesome. Dr. Langmore's group used new enzymatic assays to determine the structure of telomere DNA in normal and abnormal cells grown in vivo and in vitro in order to address specific hypotheses about the role of telomeres in aging and cancer. Scientists have discovered an important enzyme that can turn the telomere production on the DNA molecule on and off, and that's where the death switch or kill switch concept comes in. That enzyme is called telomerase. Telomerase. Not surprisingly, it seems that as we get older, the amount of telomerase in our cells decreases, Dave.
The cancer problem that you mentioned earlier. Usually if a cell makes an error in copying itself, the error will prevent the cell from duplicating itself in the future, so the mistakes are limited. But with cancer cells, cells with errors somehow turn on the production of telomerase and make the mutant cell immortal. Now, aberrant cells can reproduce unchecked and outlive normal cells. This is the process that creates tumors. Since we all have mutant precancerous cells in our body, nature has decided to shut off the telomerase as we age, thus preventing these mutant cells from growing.
Ah! Sorry, I had to say that. It's wrong. Okay, keep going.
Thank you. Scared the life, man. I thought you were dying for a minute, Dan. Your telomerase got turned off. It's a kind of programmed death. This is what a scientist says. A trade-off to reduce our lifespan in order to save us from being riddled with tumors. That's also incorrect. Nevertheless, some precancerous cells manage to reactivate their telomeres, and this has caused the research to focus more on blocking telomere production rather than trying to extend it. Anti-cancer. Anti-cancer research, I was right. Researchers believe that by introducing a molecule to block this groove, the telomerase would become unable to attach itself to the DNA and thereby limit the length of the telomere production. While this work holds hope for stopping tumor cells from reproducing forever, it does little to extend healthy cells from being rejuvenated. However, if the molecule blocker could specifically only target cancerous cells without blocking telomerase activity in healthy cells, it could be a step forward towards human life extension. And when a planned pharmaceutical can be developed that activates telomerase in the human body. Mecky.
And look, just to make another point, again, I'm happy to be refuted on this one. So yes, everybody develops cancer cells. They say about 3 a year. As you get older, that increases. So it's 3 of your cells, and there's trillions of cells in your body, turn mutant, but normally your immune system takes care of it, right? Now, what happens though, in every single instance of a cancerous or precancerous cell going mutant and turning into a cancer, every single time telomerase is switched back on. Every single cancer cell has telomerase switched on. Okay, this is not some of them, or half, or 90%. Every single cancer cell switches it back on. Okay, so in my mind, okay, it doesn't make sense to okay, let's take a step back. This is important. This is very important. How do cancer cells develop in the first place?
Well, it's usually get it in the egg, right?
Correct. So it's usually a mutational issue. So, in fact, cancers increase as you get older. And in fact, if you live long enough, you will die of cancer. If you live long enough, right? So there are a whole bunch of factors that cause cells to mutate. It could be toxic chemicals. Probably the most common that you guys know about is radiation. Radiation will certainly cause a whole bunch of cancers. There are other toxic substances in the world. Asbestosis is one of them, right? Where, asbestos can cause that. Other harmful chemicals, drugs, alcohol, tobacco, the wrong diet.
Anything on the EM spectrum above visible light.
Correct. So UV, right? That's where you wear sunblock. And the sunblock now, it turns out, is also not the best thing for you. But the point is, right, it's killing our reefs. But the point... Oh, right, absolutely. But the point is that there's a whole bunch of reasons why you get cancer. Now, let's say you avoid all of those. You live the best life. You're not exposed to any toxins, any harmful chemicals, no radiation, none of that, right? You still will get cancer. You say, why, Mackie? That's not fair. Well, the reason for that is because your telomeres are shortening. Because your cells are copying themselves less and less perfectly. That's again, we're coming back to the Hayflick limit, right? So even if you weren't exposed to any toxic substances and you lived the best life possible, you would still die of cancer. So in my mind, switching telomerase off is doing more harm than turning it on. Right? You understand what I'm saying? So because these cancers turn telomerase on anyway. So cancers turn telomerase on. So cancer cells, for all intents and purposes, will always produce perfect copies of themselves. Right? I mean, they're mutated, but they, so they're immortal. Cancer will live forever, but it kills you, so it doesn't. But your normal cells, they age, and as they age, they become more prone to mutations and harmful mutations, which can lead to cancer. If you had telomerase switched on, your telomeres would be protected, and you would not experience the Hayflick limit, because there is no longer a Hayflick limit, because you got telomerase switched on. So therefore, in my mind, the best protection against this cancer is to have telomerase switched on. Okay, it would mean that your immune system is still in tip-top shape. I mean, look, if you live a life of a party person, then that's your problem, right? I mean, it's that no one can help you. I mean, that you are in charge. Yeah, but at least you would be in charge of your destiny at that point. I mean, you could. I mean, we have eliminated the natural cell death, senescence. We have eliminated that. Telomerase is switched on and protects your telomeres. So aging should no longer be an issue for you. Imperfect cell copying should no longer be an issue for you. If you expose yourself to radiation, to toxins, to chemicals, to drugs, to whatever, that's on you, right? That's on you. And can that then lead to cancer? Absolutely, it can. Will you die? Yes, you will. Yeah, but having telomerase switched on gives you a better head start. It gives you a better
all the cells in your body from corrupt DNA.
Correct.
And therefore, the outcome is longevity.
Yes. Now, that's exactly right. Listen to that, longevity, right? Having said that, should we investigate how to switch telomerase off? Yes, we should. Why, Mackie? That contradicts what you just said. No, because we're not living in that world yet. We're living in our world. In our world, cancer cells switch telomerase back on to protect themselves. If you can figure out a mechanism on how to switch it off again in cancer cells, that would provide a very effective cancer treatment. Or not completely on its own, but it would certainly make the cancer more vulnerable to other treatments.
So thinking about having to undergo a treatment which attempts to kill you, so like chemotherapy, it's trying to kill something that's immortal.
Yes.
So by turning it off, there's an advantage towards the treatment success, and I see that as a benefit.
100%, right? But once the next generation maybe of people, I don't know, or maybe the generation after, or the generation after that, doesn't really, I mean, eventually though, right? If we ever go down that path, and let's say telomerase is left on functioning to protect all of your cells in your body throughout your life, I reckon we see a massive decline in cancers. Globally, in all kinds of cancers. It's my opinion. I mean, there are certain genetically predisposed people to certain things. It's a thing. I mean, it does happen. I do wonder, though, as we investigate this further, our DNA specifically, because our DNA is not perfect, right? And it looks like it's been, in my opinion, it's been meddled with, not just in the telomere and telomerase case, in other sections as well, right? So, to my mind, the telomerase switch off is a direct tampering. So that's a built-in kill switch. No doubt in my mind whatsoever. But there are other areas of the DNA where we seem to have been meddled with specifically, right? And if you believe the ancient stories, that's exactly what happened. So it was Igigi DNA that was used to create us, according to the ancient texts, right? Very interesting stuff. I mean, you should really read it. Read it with modern eyes, though. Read it. We shared it with some shows ago. We shared the entire epic with you, translated, so you don't have to do it yourselves, obviously. And read it. See what you think. Now, but you have to read it with your present knowledge of everything. Right? Don't read it like it was written like 7,000-8,000 years ago, like it was. And don't look at it in that context. Look at it in today's context. So if we could do that then, if we could make everybody have a better start in life, degenerative diseases could be kept in check, because your immune system is essentially your body, and it's made up of the cells in your body. If those cells in your body that make up the immune system are also protected by telomerase, then of course your immune system would be a lot stronger, because your immune system also deteriorates as you get older. It's just what happens. That's why older people are more susceptible to the flu or other diseases. It's just the nature of the beast. So saying that cancer is the reason nature turned it off is complete bogus. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, please tell me where my logic goes wrong, but it doesn't make any sense. I'm happy to on the air say I'm completely wrong, and take it all back. I'm happy to do that.
Do you know what I actually think is going on, Mackie? I think that would be more likely to be a controlled no from the establishment to prevent people from becoming immortal.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the reason for the direction.
No, we know it is, because again, let's look at the Bible, and again, Bible stories are all or mostly from much older sources. But the Garden of Eden story, right? So Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, eating from the tree of life, and it's usually an apple they eat. I don't know why they chose that fruit as a, but there it is. It's the apple, right? They eat the apple from the tree of knowledge. In fact, they don't say apple. They say we ate from the tree of knowledge. It never says what kind of fruit it is. But anyway, there it is. It's the apple. And so all of a sudden they become aware, self-aware, right? They all of a sudden realize a whole bunch of things. They sort of are no longer just mindless, but they've been given knowledge. It's similar. The story of Prometheus tells us a similar story, right? Where fire was stolen from the gods and given to us, and he was punished for it. But again, fire, in my opinion, represents light, which in turn represents knowledge, right? So so something happened that gave us knowledge. Someone stole it and made us aware, gave us a whole bunch of stuff. And in fact, some of the flood myths tell us that we were taught a whole bunch of stuff after the floods. What, though, is the reason for being kicked out of Eden? It's not because we ate from the tree of life. I mean, we were not allowed to, but that wasn't the reason we were kicked out of Eden. And then if you disagree with me, go back to your Bible. I don't care which edition. Go look at Genesis, right? Read the whole thing. We were kicked out so we would not eat from the second tree. What second tree, Mackie? The tree of life. In fact, we were kicked out of Eden, and God placed an angel with a flaming sword to protect the tree of life so we would not eat from it and become like God.
Mm-hmm.
Become like God. So we had already eaten from the tree of knowledge, so we know a whole bunch of stuff, maybe, that's good. But then, because we created in God's image, don't make no mistake, right? We were created, so the Anunnaki used the Igigi DNA, which we can assume is the same as the Anunnaki DNA, so created in the image, right? Again, probably smaller though, because all these carvings show us the Anunnaki being like 8, 9, maybe 10 feet tall. Right?
Mackie, can I just Googling?
Please.
Can I read this quote?
Please.
It's exactly what you said. It says, if Adam had eaten from the tree of life after he had sinned, all mankind would have lived forever,
Yes.
and estranged from God.
Well, that's the Christian interpretation.
Yeah, you're right. But I just wanted to reiterate to the listener,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's really important.
Yes, it is. It is critical to understand. I mean, if we talk about the original sin, right? The original sin, all people say it's eating from the tree of knowledge. But, well, sort of. I mean, the original sin concept doesn't sit with me well anyway. It's just bullshit, right? Because what it means is that we were not allowed to have knowledge and self-awareness and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we certainly were not allowed to have life everlasting either. Right? From the start, we were disadvantaged. Okay, and it ties in well with the what the story of what the Babylonians and Sumerians tell us in their creation epics. Right? The reason for our existence was never to self-actualize. We were never created to self-actualize. We're created to work and serve. That's it. Right? That we are the. Yeah. In fact, that's not true either. Sorry, because those were the Adamu. So we are the children, I guess, if you wanted to say, of the Adamo. So the Adamo were all wiped out in the flood, completely, or the cataclysm. I call the flood for simplicity's sake, but it was a cataclysm. It wasn't just a flood. We're talking about the Ice Age. We're talking about potentially an impact in the Indian Ocean, which caused a massive disruption. So there was rain, and yes, there was tsunamis, but more importantly, rising temperatures and geological activity led to massive glacial lakes breaking, the dams breaking and flooding vast areas, plus massive melting as well, which caused now the legends of this horrendous flood. So apart from the deluge, apart from the tsunamis, and apart from the glacial lakes breaking the dams and flooding land, it was an impact that caused all of that, right? It was in the Indian Ocean, and I think Dave was actually kind enough to find the impact location and share it with us in the shows we dealt with at that particular subject matter. Okay, so that's what caused and then because everything, in fact, the impact might have been triggered by someone else. So this might not have been a random impact. Let's be very clear here, right? This might have been a directed impact. And if it was not directed, then it certainly was something that others were disagreeing with, at least. I think it was directed. But people were trying to save other people. And I'm talking about people here in the widest sense of the word. So some of the Anunnaki were clearly trying to help some of the humans. And we get the story of Noah, right? Utnapishtim, and there's the Begalmer. I mean, we've got so many Noahs, it's not even funny, right?
And the fallen angels, Mekki.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Right. So there's all that subject matter, there's all this context, which we still retain, but we retain it in a religious context. We no longer look at it as history. We look at it as I guess, mythology and religion and parables. Right? No. I think we're talking about real events here, guys. I think these are real events that I remembered here. Okay. And they have managed to be remembered for thousands of years. Now, the best way to remember something is to mythologize it, to turn it into something religious, because then it becomes an article of faith, and people will die protecting it and transmitting it through the generations. That's really the best way to do that, and that's, I guess, why we have still got knowledge of it in our Christian or Islamic or Jewish context, even. But even Hindus and Buddhists understand this subject matter. In fact, they understand it more deeply than we do, because they understand the cycles of reincarnation involved here as well. But then we found these tablets dating back to 5, 6, 7, 8,000 years to the Sumerian and Babylonian times, and all of a sudden we get a lot more detailed view than we did in the Bible.
Validated.
Yeah.
View.
But the Bible is a lot more simplistic and a lot more. Not naive is the wrong word. I think simplistic really is the best word. If you look at the original, or maybe they're not even original, but if you look at the tablets dating back that long from the Sumerians and Babylonians, you get a lot more detail, and it's a lot richer story. All of a sudden, it didn't just happen because God said it. There are reasons given now, and there are some very specific details which I find fascinating, right? Around the
workforce.
Yeah, the birth mothers.
Complaints, rectification.
It's fascinating. Remember the womb mothers?
It's not in my job description.
Yeah. But it's technology that's being described as well. They were talking about these womb mothers. They split open. Today, if you look at, again, that's why you have to look at it with modern eyes. We can think of in vitro fertilization. We can think of external wombs growing human embryos.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we do it
now. Yeah.
Because we're doing it, right? It makes sense. I mean, you could even build a machine that could. I mean, we could conceivably build a machine that carries a fetus to term. We could. It's not. I mean, we can transplant fetuses from one moment to another. We can do a whole bunch of stuff, right? So it's not like we all of a sudden it's like this magic like it used to be. Now, again, that's what I'm saying. You have to read these stories with modern eyes. Don't read them in the context of when they were written. Read them in today. In fact, read them in the context 50, 100 years from now. I reckon there are things mentioned in there which we can't even conceive of yet. But if we read them in 100 years' time, we go, oh yeah, that's what that is. Right? Oh yeah, that makes sense now. But we actually have climbed the technology tree up quite high, and our imagination is really what's driving them. And our imagination is almost unlimited in this context.
And
we can imagine.
It's no different. It's no different from the helicopter glyph in the Abydos temple, in the lintel of the Abydos temple. When we first discovered it, we didn't have helicopters. We just thought it was some stylized insect.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And that's really the key here that Mekki is pointing out. And as soon as we made helicopters, we realized it was a helicopter.
Yeah.
We knew what it was.
That's it. Oh.
And in 100 years' time, rereading these texts, we're going to see stuff in there that we didn't realize we could do today.
Correct. I like to think of it when you watch a movie as a child, or a television program like 5, 6, 7 years old, right? And then you don't watch it for 30 years, and then you rewatch it. All of a sudden, it's a lot richer. It's a lot more depth. There's a lot more to it. I mean, you can get a lot out of it, right? There's a lot more for you in it than as a child. I mean, you still enjoyed it as a child, right, on that level. But now, having had 30 or 40 years of experience in your life, you look at it, even when you read a book, you come at it from that angle now. So, and that's exactly what's happening here. I mean, I'll give you a very simple example, which is so mundane that these days we wouldn't even think about it. But there's a story in Arabian Nights, right, which was translated by Richard Burton in the 1880s, I think, or 1860s, from the original Arabic. So it's 1001 stories, or 1001 nights, where Shahrazad tells the Sultan her stories, so he wouldn't kill her, right? That's really the sort of the framing story for that. But in it, it's a story of Ali Baba. Ali Baba was a guy that lived in a town, and he found this cave. In the cave, there was the treasure of robbers, right? Like the bandits had accumulated gold and diamonds and whatnot. And in order to gain access to the cave, which had massive, like there was a massive stone door, and Ali Baba couldn't get in. So the robber, I guess the robber baron, the robber, the captain, the chief, whatever, came and he says, "Open sesame." Open sesame, and the door opens. Right? Clearly magic. In that context of the time, it's magic. Even in the 1860s and 1880s, it's a fanciful description of some magic. It's like your spoken word could do anything to a physical object. What a ludicrous notion! What a ludicrous notion! Complete nonsense.
Burn
but it was
her.
burn her.
Rich.
But it was so that's why they're called fairy tales. But today, voice-activated anything shouldn't surprise any of us. In fact, you don't even have to speak. You just walk toward a door. Star Trek fashion, and it opens for you, right? But you could say "Open Sesame" if you wanted to. If you wanted to be a cool dude, and you have like this computerized house, every time you come home, your voice print will open the door when you say "Open Sesame." No one else's voice print, your voice print. Okay.
Well, my phone responds to my voice when I say, "Okay, Google, play Spotify."
Bingo.
Listen.
There you go. I heard it.
You heard it.
I heard it. Look, we have all kinds of biometric solutions now. It could be your iris, your face. My phone starts operating when it sees my face, for example. But my point is that 150 years ago, as it was translated, it's a fairy tale. What if it isn't? What if it's a memory of a tech that existed? And others, there are many other fairy tales you should look at in that kind of context, in that kind of, I guess, with new eyes. I think Marcel Proust said, a journey does not begin with a single step, but rather with a new set of eyes. Right? So if you're going to go on a journey and experience something, you got to change the way you look at things, because you're just going to be the same person, just going different places. You have to change yourself. You have to change the way you look at things. You have to change the way you perceive or react to things. Okay? You have to be open to new experiences. You have to become bigger than what you are. And we're getting close to the end of the show. So look. Hopefully you found that interesting. It is Listener Funded Radio, Dave. Look, if you have the time to spend a couple bucks, I mean, you can also become a subscriber to the station's archives. $5.95 a month. $5.95 a month will give you access to all of the archives of all the shows on Freedom Slips, right? Revolution.radio, which is awesome. I think it's money well spent if you're interested in this kind of stuff. And what we bring to you is just a small component part of the overall station. Hopefully you enjoy the content. Certainly the other hosts have to offer a lot as well. Different things.
Every hour there's new content getting loaded in.
Yeah, that's right. So if you have the time to do that, then please go ahead. Or maybe you want to give a subscription as a Christmas present to someone that likes to.
Oh, that'd be nice.
It's not a bad idea, right?
Ah.
$5.95. It'll cost you, what's that? $60? No, but $72 a year it'll cost you. That's all right. It's not too bad. A quick math, I think I'm right. 6 times 12, yeah. So $72. It's not too bad. There's music.
Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. Enjoy daylight saving wherever you are, or the end of it. Let's hope we can vote it out next time. And if you're in the US, good luck on your election again. Take care. We'll see you next week for another Shiny Side Out with David Mackey.